There is a moment, just before sleep takes you, when the world behind your eyes begins to soften. The edges of the room dissolve. The weight you have been carrying all day, the small urgencies, the noise, the relentless forward pull of time, all of it begins to loosen its grip. And in that quiet, expanding space between waking and dreaming, something ancient stirs. A question without language. A feeling older than memory. The sense that somewhere, beyond everything you can name or reach or hold, there is a vastness so complete, so breathtaking in its silence, that even the concept of loneliness becomes something sacred. Tonight, we are going there. Not quickly. Not with the sharp, clinical language of textbooks or the urgent excitement of news. We are going slowly, the way starlight travels, patient, unhurried, crossing distances that would shatter ordinary understanding if we let them. We are going to breathe our way outward, together, one long and gentle exhale at a time, until the familiar world behind you is nothing more than a small, warm memory glowing faintly in the infinite dark. Let your body settle now. Feel wherever you are resting, the surface beneath you, the quiet pressure of gravity holding you gently in place. This is the last solid thing we will name for a while. Everything from here unfolds into space. Begin with what you know. Begin with the night sky above you, even if walls and ceilings separate you from it right now. Imagine it there, always there, that ancient ceiling of light. On the clearest night, with no city glow to wash it away, the human eye can detect roughly 5,000 individual stars without any instrument at all. 5,000 points of fire, each one a sun, many of them far larger and far older than the one that warms our mornings. You have looked up at that sky your entire life. Most people have. And still it remains inexhaustible. Still it holds more than any single gaze can fully receive. But those 5,000 stars you can see, they are only the ones closest to us, relatively speaking. They are neighbors. They are the front porch of a neighborhood that stretches so far in every direction that the word far stops meaning anything useful after a certain point. Our galaxy alone, the Milky Way, that slow, luminous river arcing overhead on moonless nights, contains somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. That range exists not because astronomers are guessing, but because the galaxy is so large, so layered with clouds of gas and dust and the accumulated light of hundreds of millions of years, that even with our most powerful telescopes we are still in the process of understanding our own cosmic home. We live inside something we cannot fully see. And that galaxy, vast as it is only one. Only one of an estimated 2 trillion galaxies scattered across the observable universe. 2 trillion islands of light, each containing hundreds of billions of suns, each separated from the others by distances measured not in miles, not in years, but in millions and billions of light years of open, silent space. This is the stage we are setting tonight. Not to frighten you. Never that. But to invite you into something that the noise of ordinary life rarely permits, a true reckoning with scale. With silence. With the particular and profound quality of emptiness that exists out there, between the galaxies, between the stars, between the atoms that make up the dust that once made up the ancient hearts of long-dead suns. An emptiness that is not nothing. It is not nothing at all. It is the context in which everything meaningful has ever happened. It is the quiet page on which the universe has been slowly writing its most extraordinary sentences for nearly 14 billion years. And within that vast and breathing darkness, there are places, remarkable, strange, almost incomprehensible places, where the loneliness reaches a depth that has no human equivalent. Where the nearest star might be millions of light years away. Where a single photon of light might travel for longer than the current age of the Earth before encountering a single other particle. Places that exist beyond the reach of any telescope we have yet built. Places that exist in theory, confirmed by mathematics, inferred by the behavior of gravity and light and the slow expansion of spacetime itself. These are the loneliest places in the universe. And tonight, we are going to visit them. Not all at once. Slowly. With a kind of quiet attention that belongs to the hours just before deep sleep, when the mind becomes soft and open and genuinely capable of holding ideas too large for ordinary daylight. We are going to let the darkness become comfortable. We are going to let the silence become something you lean into rather than something you fill. So breathe. Let your shoulders drop a little further. Let your jaw unclench if it has been holding anything. You are not required to do anything right now except allow yourself to be carried. We begin not with the farthest and most extreme of these lonely places, not yet, but with something closer. Something that will help us build the right quality of feeling, the right interior spaciousness, before we move outward into the truly uncharted. We begin with a single, deliberate step away from the familiar, the way a traveler stands at the edge of a great plain and takes one breath before stepping forward into it. That first step is simply this, the space between here and the moon. It sounds almost modest when you say it. The moon. That familiar silver companion that has governed tides and calendars and the dreams of human beings for as long as there have been human beings to dream. Poets have addressed it by name. Farmers have planted by its cycles. Children have pointed at it from backseats of cars on long nighttime drives, and something in that gesture, that small upward pointing finger, contains the entire history of human wonder in a single motion. We know the moon. We feel we own a certain intimacy with it. And yet, the distance between the surface of the Earth and the surface of the moon is approximately 239,000 miles. If you were to drive there in a car at highway speed, without stopping, it would take you roughly 6 months. If you were to walk, the journey would consume the better part of a decade. The Apollo astronauts, traveling in spacecraft moving at speeds no human being had ever survived before, took 3 days. 3 days of sitting in a capsule roughly the size of a small living room, watching the Earth shrink behind them and the moon grow slowly, incrementally ahead, while the darkness on all sides deepened into something no photograph has ever fully captured. Not because cameras lack resolution, but because the darkness of deep space is not merely an absence of light. It is a presence. It has a quality. The astronauts who traveled through it described something that language kept failing to hold, a blackness so absolute, so complete, so utterly indifferent to their existence, that it changed something permanently in the way they understood themselves. That is only the distance to the moon. Now exhale that distance. Let it go. Because we are only just beginning to calibrate our sense of scale, and the moon is, in the full context of what we will explore tonight, essentially still in the room with us. Beyond the moon, the solar system continues outward with a patience that defies comprehension. Mars hangs somewhere between 35 million and 250 million miles away, depending on where both planets sit in their respective orbits at any given moment. On its best day, its closest approach, you could theoretically send a radio signal to a rover on the Martian surface and wait only about 3 minutes for it to arrive. On its farthest reach, that same signal would take more than 20 minutes. 20 minutes for light itself, the fastest thing permitted by the laws of physics, to cross the silence between two neighboring planets in the same solar system. Let that settle into you the way warmth settles into tired muscles. We keep moving outward, past the rust-colored deserts of Mars, past the asteroid belt where millions of rocky remnants orbit in a slow, grinding conversation with the sun's gravity, and then into the domain of the gas giants. Jupiter, immense and swirling, its great red spot, a storm that has been spinning continuously for at least 350 years, visible from a distance that still staggers the imagination. Saturn with its rings, those impossibly delicate-seeming bands of ice and rock that stretch outward for nearly 200,000 miles yet average perhaps only 30 feet thick in places, like a silk ribbon draped around a planet the size of 900 Earths. These worlds are still inside our solar system, still held, however loosely, by the same star that rises each morning outside your window. And yet the distances involved have already become numbers that the human brain cannot truly feel. It can calculate them. It can print them in textbooks. But feel them, the way you feel the warmth of a fire or the weight of someone's hand, that is something else entirely. That is something that requires practice. That requires exactly the kind of slow, patient, nighttime attention we are giving this right now. Because here is what matters for where we are going. Even the outer edge of our solar system, where the sun has faded to something barely brighter than a very bright star, where the Voyager probes drift in a cold and lightless silence after more than 4 decades of continuous travel, even this is still home. Still familiar in the way that the farthest room in a very large house is still inside the house. The true loneliness begins when you step outside. When you cross the heliopause, that invisible, shimmering boundary where the sun's solar wind finally loses its struggle against the pressure of interstellar space, you enter a different category of existence. Not a different country. Not a different continent. A different category. The nearest star to our own sun, Proxima Centauri, sits approximately 4.2 light-years away. A light-year is the distance light travels in a single year, moving at 186,000 miles per second without pause or rest. 4.2 of those years, end to end, of nothing but open, dark, cold interstellar space, punctuated by nothing, interrupted by nothing, offering no landmark, no waypoint, no surface to rest upon, no signal to receive. If you launched a spacecraft today using our finest current technology, it would take approximately 73,000 years to reach Proxima Centauri. 73,000 years of sailing through a darkness so pure, so unbroken, that the concept of direction would begin to lose its meaning. There would be no up, no down, no landmark to orient against. Only the faint, distant smear of the Milky Way behind you, and the equally faint, equally distant smear of it ahead, and on all sides the deep and breathing black of interstellar space, indifferent and ancient and breathtakingly, heartbreakingly still. This is the space between stars. And it is worth sitting with that for a moment, not rushing past it toward the more extreme destinations we will eventually reach. Because there is something important here, something that will serve as a kind of emotional foundation for everything else we are going to explore together. The space between stars is not empty in the scientific sense. It contains matter, thin, extraordinarily diffuse clouds of hydrogen and helium, trace amounts of more complex molecules, the occasional drifting grain of cosmic dust so small it would be invisible to the naked even if you held it directly in front of you. In the densest regions of interstellar space, you might find as many as 1 million atoms per cubic centimeter. That sounds like abundance until you compare it to the air in this room right now, which contains approximately 10 billion atoms in that same cubic centimeter. The space between stars is, for all meaningful purposes, as close to true emptiness as the universe permits. And yet particles persist. Light persists, traveling those incomprehensible distances without a single collision, without anything to slow it or scatter it or remind it that it is moving. A photon of light leaving Proxima Centauri right now will arrive at Earth in 4.2 years, having touched absolutely nothing along the way. It will have crossed the equivalent of 25 trillion miles in a state of perfect, uninterrupted solitude. And when it finally strikes the retina of someone lying on their back in a field somewhere, looking up on a clear night, that photon's long journey will end in an act of perception. In a moment of wonder. In the slight widening of a pair of human eyes. There is something quietly astonishing about that exchange. But we are moving outward still. We are not stopping at the nearest star, or the nearest dozen stars, or even the nearest 1,000. We are building toward something. We are calibrating ourselves for distances and silences that make the space between Proxima Centauri and our Sun feel, eventually, like the gap between two words in the same sentence. Our galaxy, the Milky Way, is approximately 100,000 light-years in diameter. 100,000 years of light-speed travel, edge to edge. It contains its stars relatively densely packed near the center, in that bright, crowded bulge of ancient suns that glows like an ember when you photograph the galaxy's core. But toward the outer edges, toward the spiral arms where our own solar system resides, roughly 26,000 light-years from the galactic center, the stars thin out. The distances between them grow. The silence between each point of light deepens. And out beyond the visible disk of the galaxy, beyond the last trailing wisps of the outermost spiral arms, there is a region called the galactic halo. The galactic halo is not empty. Like interstellar space, it is defined by what it lacks rather than what it contains. It is a vast, roughly spherical region of extremely diffuse gas, dark matter, and scattered globular clusters, ancient, densely packed balls of hundreds of thousands of stars, orbiting the galaxy's center at great distances, like slow, silent sentinels circling a fire from very far away. The halo extends outward for hundreds of thousands of light-years beyond the visible disk of the galaxy. And within it, the distances between any two given stars become so enormous that the night sky, if you were somehow standing in the halo and looking outward, would appear almost entirely dark. The Milky Way itself would be visible as a faint, luminous disk hanging in the distance. A smudge of light. A rumor of home. The globular clusters scattered through the halo are among the oldest objects in the observable universe. Some of them are 12 to 13 billion years old, formed in the early epochs of the cosmos when the universe itself was only a few 100 million years old, still hot and turbulent and figuring out what it was going to become. The stars inside these clusters are ancient beyond reckoning, many of them first-generation stars forged from the primordial hydrogen and helium of the Big Bang, before supernovae had yet scattered the heavier elements, the carbon, the oxygen, the iron, that would eventually make planets and oceans and living things possible. To stand, even in imagination, among those ancient stars is to stand at the very edge of time itself. To look back through all the accumulated history of the cosmos and see something that was there almost at the beginning, burning quietly through billions of years of change, outlasting generations of younger stars, watching galaxies form and collide and merge and reshape themselves over timescales that dwarf everything we have ever called ancient. And even those clusters, ancient and venerable as they are, exist in a kind of proximity to one another compared to what lies beyond the galaxy's gravitational reach. Because once we step beyond the outermost boundary of the Milky Way's influence, once we enter the space that separates one galaxy from another, the scale of loneliness we have been carefully, patiently building toward begins to reveal itself in its full and staggering depth. The space between galaxies is called the intergalactic medium, and the name, clinical and quiet as it sounds, contains within it one of the most profound silences in all of existence. Not the silence of a room after everyone has left. Not the silence of a forest before dawn. Something older than either of those. Something that has never, in its entire history, been anything other than what it is: vast, cold, dark, and almost incomprehensibly empty. To understand the intergalactic medium, you first need to release any remaining sense of scale you brought with you from the world of human experience. Everything you have used to measure distance up until now, the drive to the next city, the flight across an ocean, even the 3-day journey to the moon, all of it dissolves here like morning mist. Even the light year, that unit we have been using as a kind of stepping stone across the darkness, begins to feel inadequate. In intergalactic space, distances are measured in megaparsecs. 1 parsec is approximately 3.26 light-years. 1 megaparsec is 1 million parsecs. 3.26 million light-years. and the distances between galaxy clusters are routinely measured in hundreds of megaparsecs. Breathe that in slowly. There is no need to fully grasp it. The goal is not comprehension in the ordinary sense. The goal is something more like surrender, a gentle, willing release of the need for scale to remain human-sized. Let the numbers wash over you the way deep water washes over the hull of a ship. You do not need to hold them. You only need to feel their weight. The intergalactic medium is not a vacuum in the strictest physical sense. It contains matter, ionized gas, primarily hydrogen and helium stripped of their electrons by the intense radiation of ancient quasars and the accumulated heat of cosmic structure formation. But the density of this matter is almost theological in its thinness. In the deepest regions between galaxy filaments, you might find fewer than one atom per cubic meter. One single atom, alone, in a space the size of a large room. Surrounded on all sides by nothing. No neighbor. No surface. No warmth. No signal. Just the slow, cold expansion of spacetime carrying it further from everything else with every passing second. There is a particular quality of feeling that arises when you sit with this image long enough. It is not quite sadness, though it rhymes with sadness. It is not quite awe, though awe is woven through it. It is something more like the feeling of standing at a window very late at night, looking out at a world that has gone entirely still, and understanding for just a moment that the stillness is not temporary. That somewhere, in some direction, it extends without limit. That feeling is what intergalactic space actually is. The large-scale structure of the universe, as astronomers have mapped it through decades of patient observation, resembles nothing so much as a cosmic web. Imagine the most delicate, most expansive spider's web you have ever seen, stretched across a space so large that each strand of the web is itself a filament of millions of galaxies, and each intersection where strands meet is a cluster or supercluster of galaxies containing hundreds or thousands of individual galactic islands, each island containing hundreds of billions of stars. The strands of this web are called cosmic filaments. The intersections are called nodes or clusters. And between the filaments, between the nodes, in the enormous three-dimensional spaces bounded by the web on all sides but containing almost nothing within them, are the cosmic voids. The voids. This is where we are heading. This is the address of one category of the loneliest places in the universe. Not a star. Not a region between stars. Not even the vast silence between galaxies. But the spaces between the very structures that galaxies themselves organize into. The spaces where the cosmic web has left nothing. Where the universe, in its large-scale architecture, simply did not build. The largest known void in the observable universe is called the Boötes Void, named for the constellation in whose direction it was first discovered in 1981 by astronomer Robert Kirshner and his colleagues, who were conducting a survey of galaxy distributions and found, to their considerable surprise, an enormous region of space that contained almost nothing at all. The Boötes Void spans approximately 330 million light-years in diameter. 330 million light-years of space containing, at last count, only 60 known galaxies, where current models of cosmic structure would predict something closer to 2,000. When Kirshner first described it, he reportedly said that if the Milky Way had been located in the center of the Boötes Void, we would not have known of the existence of any other galaxy until the 1960s. Our telescopes, for all of human history before that decade, would have shown us nothing but darkness in every direction. No Andromeda. No Magellanic Clouds. No faint smear of distant light to suggest that the universe extended beyond our own island of stars. We would have been, in the most complete sense imaginable, alone in a darkness without edges. Sit with that for a moment. Let it move through you without resistance. A civilization, an entire species capable of mathematics and music and the construction of cathedrals, looking up at a sky that offered nothing back. A sky that was simply dark. Completely, uniformly, unrelentingly dark. Not the darkness of a cloudy night, where you sense the stars hidden behind a temporary veil. Not the darkness of a new moon, where the familiar shapes of constellations are simply dimmed. A darkness with no veil. A darkness that was not concealing anything. A darkness that was the answer, not the question. There is something about that image that reaches past intellectual understanding and touches something much older in us. Something instinctual. The part of human consciousness that has always oriented itself by light, that learned to navigate by stars, to mark seasons by the movement of the sun, to find comfort in the distant glow of a fire on a dark hillside. That part responds to the idea of a lightless sky with a recognition that goes deeper than thought. We are creatures of orientation. We are beings who require, at some fundamental level, the knowledge that somewhere out there, something is burning. To live inside the Boötes void would be to have that taken away entirely. And yet, even the Boötes void is not the most extreme expression of cosmic loneliness we will encounter tonight. It is vast, yes. It is staggering in its emptiness, certainly. But it exists within the observable universe. It has edges. Beyond its boundaries, the cosmic web resumes. Filaments of galaxies press against its outer walls. Light from those surrounding galaxies does, technically, penetrate its interior, however faintly. A sufficiently powerful telescope, positioned somewhere within the void, could theoretically detect the distant shimmer of the surrounding structure. The isolation is profound, but it is not absolute. Absolute is somewhere else. But we are not ready for absolute yet. We are still learning the grammar of this silence, still letting our interior landscape expand to accommodate the vocabulary of cosmic loneliness. And there is more to understand about voids before we move beyond them. Because voids are not simply absences. They are not mistakes in the cosmic blueprint or regions where the universe forgot to place its furniture. They are, in a very real sense, as much a part of the structure of the universe as the filaments and clusters that define their edges. They are shaped by the same forces. They participate in the same grand architecture. In the early universe, fractions of a second after the Big Bang, the distribution of matter was almost perfectly uniform. Almost. There were tiny quantum fluctuations, variations in density so infinitesimally small that they would have been invisible to any observer, had any observer existed, and those fluctuations were the seeds of everything. Regions that were very slightly denser than average began to attract more matter through gravity. Regions that were very slightly less dense began to lose matter to their denser neighbors. Over hundreds of millions of years, these tiny differences compounded. The denser regions grew denser still, eventually forming the first stars and galaxies. The less dense regions grew emptier, their matter slowly pulled away toward the growing filaments, leaving behind the voids. The voids, in other words, are the exhale of the universe. The long, slow outbreath of cosmic structure formation, the spaces left behind as matter organized itself into something magnificent and intricate and interconnected. They are defined by their relationship to what surrounds them. They are the silence between the notes, and any musician will tell you that the silence between the notes is not empty. It is load-bearing. It is what gives the music its shape. But knowing this, understanding the elegant physics of void formation, appreciating the structural role that emptiness plays in the cosmic web, does not make standing inside one feel any less like standing inside one. The intellect can contextualize. The heart simply experiences. And what the heart experiences, moving through the conceptual space of a region like the Boötes void, is something very close to the feeling of being the only lit window in a city that has gone dark. Something close to the feeling of speaking into a room and hearing your voice return to you unchanged, unabsorbed, because there is nothing there to receive it. Sound, of course, does not travel in space. There is no medium for it, no air or water to carry compression waves from one point to another. Space is, in the most literal acoustic sense, perfectly silent. Whatever you broadcast into the void, whatever signal, whatever cry, whatever carefully composed transmission, travels as electromagnetic radiation, as radio waves or light, moving at the maximum speed the universe allows, and dissipates with distance according to the inverse square law, growing fainter by the square of the distance traveled, until it becomes indistinguishable from the background radiation that fills all of space, that faint, cold, microwave glow left over from the Big Bang. Itself, the universe's oldest light, stretched and cooled by 13.8 billion years of cosmic expansion into a whisper so quiet it has a temperature of only 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. That background radiation is everywhere. It fills the voids as surely as it fills the space around galaxies. It is the universe's own ambient hum, present in every direction, in every region, regardless of how empty or how full. And there is something unexpectedly comforting about that, the knowledge that even in the deepest, most featureless void, even in the loneliest coordinate in the observable universe, the faint warmth of the beginning is still there, still present, still whispering its ancient, wordless story into the dark. The universe has never been completely silent. Even in its emptiest places, it carries the memory of its own beginning like a heartbeat too faint to hear but too persistent to ignore. Let that settle into you now. Let it become part of the texture of this journey. Because we are about to move into regions where even that comfort will be tested. Where the question of what remains when everything else is stripped away becomes not a philosophical exercise, but a physical reality so extreme that it reshapes the meaning of the word alone. But first, stay here a moment longer. Stay in the soft, expanding awareness of what we have already traveled through together. From the surface of the Earth, through the familiar dark of our solar system, past the cold boundary where the sun's influence finally surrenders to interstellar space, across the extraordinary distances between stars, out through the galactic halo where ancient globular clusters orbit in slow and patient silence, and then beyond the edge of the Milky Way entirely, into the intergalactic medium, into the cosmic web with its filaments and nodes and the vast, breathing voids between them. We have covered, in the quiet space of these last few passages, distances that would require the entire current age of the universe to physically cross, even traveling at the speed of light. And we are not done. There is a concept in cosmology that most people encounter once, briefly, in a documentary or a science class, and then allow to slip back into the comfortable fog of things that are technically known but not truly felt. It is the concept of the observable universe. The observable universe is not the whole universe. It is simply the portion of the universe from which light has had enough time, in the 13.8 billion years since the Big Bang, to reach us. It is a sphere, centered on Earth not because Earth is special or central, but because observation is always centered on the observer, with a radius of approximately 46 billion light-years in every direction. The reason that number is larger than 13.8 billion, the age of the universe in years, is because space itself has been expanding during all the time that light has been traveling. The galaxies at the edge of the observable universe were much closer to us when they emitted the light we are now receiving. They have since been carried much farther away by the expansion of space-time itself. And they are still moving away. Every galaxy beyond our local group, the small cluster of galaxies that includes the Milky Way, Andromeda, and a few dozen smaller companions, is receding from us. The further away a galaxy is, the faster it recedes, because there is more expanding space between us and it. Beyond a certain distance, Galaxies recede faster than light itself can travel, which means their light will never reach us. They have crossed what cosmologists call the cosmic event horizon, and they are, for all practical and physical purposes, gone. Permanently and irrevocably beyond the reach of any signal, any observation, any connection whatsoever. This is the first appearance of a truly absolute loneliness. Not the loneliness of distance, which is merely a matter of time and patience, but the loneliness of an expanding universe, a loneliness enforced not by space alone but by the geometry of spacetime itself. A loneliness that no technology, however advanced, however patient, could ever overcome. Because the barrier is not a wall. It is not a locked door. It is the very fabric of the cosmos, stretching faster than the fastest thing in it. Astronomers estimate that the observable universe contains somewhere in the region of 2 trillion galaxies. But the full universe, the actual universe, extending beyond the horizon we can see, may be vastly, incomprehensibly larger. Some models suggest it is at least 250 times larger in volume than the observable portion. Others suggest it may be effectively infinite. The honest answer is that we do not know, and may never know, because the information required to answer that question is physically prevented from reaching us by the same expansion that defines the horizon in the first place. We are, in a very precise and literal sense, inside a bubble of knowable space, surrounded by an unknown that is not merely large but potentially boundless. And as time passes, as the universe continues to expand, that bubble does not grow larger relative to what surrounds it. In terms of what we can see, what we can reach, what we can ever hope to contact or be contacted by, our accessible universe is actually shrinking. Galaxies that are currently visible to us will eventually cross our event horizon. Their light will redshift into invisibility. They will slip away from us without announcement, without farewell, carried by the silent expansion of space into a permanent and unreachable beyond. In the very far future, in timescales so immense they make the current age of the universe feel like the first breath of a very long morning, the night sky will darken. Not because the stars burn out, though they will, but because the galaxies themselves will have receded beyond the horizon, one by one, leaving behind only the local group, clustered together by gravity against the outward pull of expansion, a small island of light surrounded by an absolute and total dark. Not darkness as we experience it on a moonless night, when the Milky Way still spills across the sky like a river of ancient light. Not the darkness of a closed room, or a deep cave, or the bottom of the ocean. This darkness would be of an entirely different category. A darkness that carries no memory of what came before it. A darkness with no edge, no boundary, no suggestion of anything waiting on the other side. And into that darkness, if anything remained to observe it, if some patient, enduring form of consciousness could persist across those incomprehensible timescales, the cosmos would appear, for all practical purposes, empty. A universe that once blazed with hundreds of billions of galaxies, each containing hundreds of billions of stars, would have folded most of its light beyond the horizon of the reachable. What remained visible would be a single gravitationally bound island, our local group, perhaps eventually collapsed by its own weight into one vast elliptical remnant, glowing faintly, alone in a void so complete that the very concept of elsewhere would have lost its meaning. This is one kind of cosmic loneliness. The loneliness of the very far future. The loneliness of a universe that has grown too large for its own light to cross. But there are places that carry a version of that loneliness already. Right now. Tonight. While you breathe slowly and let the weight of wakefulness begin to lift. There is a region of space known as the cosmic void. Not a poetic term, but a technical one. Voids are the vast, nearly empty expanses that exist between the large-scale filaments and walls of galaxy clusters, the places where the cosmic web grows thin, where the threads of matter fade out, where the architecture of structure gives way to something closer to pure, undiluted nothing. Some of these voids span hundreds of millions of light-years across. To pass through one, even at the speed of light, would take longer than life has existed on Earth. Inside a void, the density of matter drops to a small fraction of the average density of the universe. There are still a few galaxies scattered through these regions, lonely wanderers, gravitationally isolated, adrift in a space so underpopulated it almost seems accidental that they are there at all. One of these, a dwarf galaxy called MCG plus 0102-015, sits embedded in a void so deep and so expansive that its nearest galactic neighbor lies more than 100 million light-years away. Consider that for a moment, gently, without urgency. 100 million light-years of empty space in every direction. No neighboring galaxy to blur the horizon. No gravitational partner pulling softly at its edges. No distant glow to interrupt the dark. For any world within that galaxy, the extragalactic sky would be almost completely barren. The stars above would be their own, only their own, and beyond those stars would stretch a silence that goes on, and on, and on, with nothing to interrupt it until the distance becomes almost theoretical. Even within galaxies, loneliness takes on forms that the human mind struggles to hold. Near the edges of large spiral galaxies, in the outermost arms where the density of stars thins into scattering, individual stars can be separated from their nearest neighbors by dozens of light-years. The night sky from a planet orbiting one of these outer stars would be sparse in a way that feels almost melancholy, a scattering of dim points, widely spaced, with large stretches of darkness between them. No brilliant band of stars arcing overhead the way our own Milky Way does for us. Just a quiet, minimalist sky, and the long, slow pull of solitude. And then there are the rogue planets. These are worlds that were born in the orbit of stars, formed from the same rotating disk of dust and gas that gave rise to everything else in their systems. But through gravitational interactions, a close encounter with another planet, a near-passing star, the chaotic early dynamics of a young solar system, they were flung outward. Ejected. Cast loose from the warmth and gravity of their parent star without ceremony, without warning, drifting out into the interstellar dark on trajectories that will carry them through the galaxy for billions of years with no star to orbit, no sun to rise, no external source of light to fall upon their surfaces. Current estimates suggest that rogue planets may be extraordinarily common. Some models propose that for every star in the Milky Way, there may be several of these wandering worlds moving silently through the dark between them. Hundreds of billions of planets, perhaps more, traveling through interstellar space in permanent night. On such a world, if you stood on its surface, and some may have subsurface oceans kept liquid by residual geological heat, so the word surface carries its own kind of weight, you would see no sun, no sunrise, no daylight, no seasons driven by proximity to a star. You would see only the stars of the galaxy above you, slowly wheeling, impossibly far away, none of them yours. You would orbit nothing. You would belong to nothing in the traditional astronomical sense. You would simply move, through the cold and the dark, carried forward by momentum, by the simple physics of a universe that flung you outward once and has never called you back. And there is something in that image, the rogue planet, the untethered world, the stone flung loose from its star and carried into the permanent in-between, that touches something quiet and wordless in the human chest. Not quite grief, not quite wonder, something that lives between the two, in that soft, low place where we keep our oldest feelings about belonging and about distance and about what it means to be somewhere rather than nowhere. We are, in a sense, among the fortunate. Our world orbits a star. Our star moves through a galaxy. Our galaxy belongs to a local group. We are nested inside structure, held inside gravity, located inside a web of relationships that gives our position in the universe a kind of meaning, or at least a kind of context. We are somewhere. We have neighbors, even if the nearest of them is 4 light-years away, even if the light from our closest galactic companion takes 2.5 million years to reach our eyes. But the rogue planet has none of that. It has only momentum and darkness and the slow, indifferent passage of time. And still the universe does not end there, in its catalogue of lonely geometries. There is a place, not a place in the conventional sense, but a region, a condition, a set of coordinates that carries its own particular quality of isolation, known as the cosmic microwave background. It is not empty space. It is, in fact, the oldest light in the universe, the afterglow of the Big Bang itself, stretched by 13.5 billion years of expansion into microwaves so cool and so diffuse that we can only detect them with instruments of extraordinary sensitivity. This light fills the universe uniformly, arriving from every direction at once, a whisper from the very beginning of everything, so ancient it predates the first stars, predates the first atoms, predates almost everything we would recognize as matter. To exist inside that background radiation is to be surrounded by the echo of an event so primordial that no living thing could ever have witnessed it. It is loneliness of a temporal kind. Not the loneliness of distance, but the loneliness of time. The loneliness of being separated from your origin by an interval so vast it cannot be felt, cannot be traversed, cannot be reversed or recovered. All of us carry that separation. Every atom in your body was forged inside a star or scattered in the aftermath of one. The hydrogen in your cells is older than the Earth, older than the Sun, older than the galaxy itself. It formed in the first few minutes after the Big Bang, in a universe so hot and dense it glowed white in every direction, and has been moving, cooling, assembling and disassembling ever since through gas clouds and nebulae and stellar cores and supernova shockwaves and the slow accretion of planets and the slower unfolding of biology until it arrived, after all of that, here, in this moment, drawn together into a form that breathes and thinks and listens to the sound of its own existence. That hydrogen has crossed a distance no rogue planet could match. Not in space, but in time. And somewhere out in that space, past the local group and past the nearest voids and past the great filaments of the cosmic web, there are galaxy clusters so massive and so remote that the light we see from them left before our sun existed. Before Earth formed. Before the solar system condensed from its parent cloud. We are seeing those clusters not as they are, but as they were, and what they are now, tonight, in the present moment of the universe, we cannot know. Some of them may have changed beyond recognition. Some of them may have merged with neighbors, their individual galaxies drawn together by gravity into new and unrecognizable configurations. Some of the stars we see in those ancient images have long since ended, collapsed into neutron stars or black holes or cooling white dwarfs that shine with borrowed heat. We are surrounded, always, by images of the past. The universe does not offer us a window into the present at these distances. It offers us only memory. Only light that has already traveled so far that by the time it reaches us, it is a kind of fossil, a record of something that once was, arriving with the patience of all that distance behind it, tapping gently on the surface of our instruments and our eyes, and saying only, "I was here." There is a particular loneliness in being unable to know what is happening right now, at the far edge of what is visible. The universe is full of events occurring at this very moment, in this same present, that we will never learn about. Not because they are hidden or forbidden, but simply because the light carrying their information has not yet had time to reach us, and in some cases never will. The expansion of space will carry some of those regions beyond our horizon before their news can arrive. Things are happening out there. Immense things. Stars igniting and dying. Galaxies colliding in slow motion over millions of years. Perhaps, somewhere in the distribution of all those hundreds of billions of galaxies and all those trillions of planets, something looking upward at its own sky, into its own version of the dark, wondering the same things we wonder, feeling the same quiet pull of the unknown, reaching outward with whatever instruments it has built toward a cosmos that offers back only silence and light too old to answer. And yet we keep reaching. That impulse to send signals outward, to listen for something coming back, to refuse the silence even when the silence is vast and patient and very old, is one of the most quietly remarkable things about the kind of life that has emerged on this particular world. We built radio telescopes the size of valleys. We aimed them at the sky. We listened for decades. We sent our own messages outward, encoded in mathematics, in the universal language of prime numbers and hydrogen frequencies, trusting that if anything out there had also learned to count, it might recognize the pattern and understand that something here was trying to speak. The Voyager probes are perhaps the most poignant expression of that impulse. Launched in 1977, they carry golden records, literal discs of gold-plated copper etched with sounds and images from Earth. Music, greetings in 55 languages. The sound of rain, the sound of surf, the sound of a mother speaking softly to her child. These objects are now the most distant human-made artifacts in existence, moving through the interstellar medium at speeds that feel tremendous on a human scale and almost perfectly still on a cosmic one. Voyager 1 has traveled roughly 23 billion miles from Earth. In the context of the distance to even our nearest stellar neighbor, that is a fraction so small it barely registers. It will not reach another star system for tens of thousands of years. And when it does, if it does, there is no particular reason to believe anyone will be there to find it. It will most likely pass through that system silently, undetected, continuing outward into the dark, carrying its golden record through a universe that may never open it. And still it was sent. That says something about us. Something worth holding gently as you rest. That we knew the odds. We understood the distances. We had already done the mathematics of how unlikely it was that this small, spinning disk would ever be found, ever be heard, ever be understood. And we made it anyway. We pressed the sounds of our world into gold and released them into the dark, not because we were certain of anything, but because the act of reaching felt necessary. Because silence, freely chosen, felt worse than the long uncertainty of a message sent without guarantee of arrival. There is a concept in the study of loneliness, human loneliness, the kind that lives in the body and the nervous system and the quiet hours before sleep, that distinguishes between being alone and feeling alone. You can be surrounded by people and feel the particular ache of disconnection. You can be physically isolated and feel held, somehow, by something. By memory. By love that persists across distance. By the knowledge that somewhere, someone else is also awake in the dark, thinking thoughts not entirely unlike your own. The universe, in its way, seems to observe a version of that distinction. Space is almost incomprehensibly empty in terms of raw volume. If you took all the matter in the observable universe and spread it evenly through all the space the observable universe contains, the average density would be extraordinarily low, only a few atoms per cubic meter, and in the great voids between galaxy filaments, far less than that. In a purely physical sense, the universe is almost nothing. Almost entirely empty. A vast, cold, expanding volume of space in which matter is a rare and temporary arrangement, a brief clustering of particles that gravity has managed, against all that emptiness, to hold together. And yet, the universe is also threaded with connection in ways that are not immediately visible but are nonetheless real. Gravity moves across all distances without attenuation. Every object with mass exerts a gravitational pull on every other object with mass, no matter how far apart they are. The Earth pulls on galaxies billions of light-years away, infinitesimally, immeasurably, but genuinely. The large-scale structure of the cosmos, those filaments and walls and nodes of galaxy clusters, emerged from quantum fluctuations in the first fractions of a second after the Big Bang, tiny variations in density that gravity then amplified over billions of years into the architecture we see today. The seeds of every galaxy, every star, every planet were planted in the first breath of the universe and have been unfolding according to the same physics ever since. We are not separate from that. We are part of it. The same forces that shaped the first galaxy shaped the atoms in your hands. The same expanding space that is carrying distant galaxies beyond our horizon was the space in which every structure you have ever known came to exist. The loneliness of the cosmos and the connectedness of the cosmos are not in contradiction. They are two aspects of the same truth, seen from different distances, felt in different registers. When you look at a void, that immense, dark, nearly empty gulf between the filaments, you are also looking at the space that makes the filaments possible. The emptiness and the structure define each other. Without the voids, there would be no walls of galaxies catching the light. Without the space between, there would be no between to cross. And the crossing matters. Not just for spacecraft, not just for light, not just for the long patient signals we send outward hoping for something to send back. It matters because the crossing is where meaning lives. In the distance between one thing and another. In the space that separates and also, in its way, quietly connects. Because space, for all its emptiness, is not indifferent in the way we sometimes imagine it to be. Indifference implies a kind of awareness that has chosen not to care. The universe has no such awareness, no such choice. It simply is. It expands according to its nature. It curves around mass according to its nature. It allows light to travel and time to pass and matter to assemble itself into temporary, improbable configurations according to its nature. And in that allowing, in that vast and unintentional permissiveness, something remarkable has happened at least once, on at least one small world orbiting one ordinary star in one spiral arm of one galaxy among hundreds of billions. Something became aware of the darkness. Something opened its eyes and looked up and felt the specific, nameless feeling that comes from standing beneath a sky full of stars and understanding, even partially, what you are looking at. Something built instruments to see further than its eyes could reach. Something developed mathematics to describe what its instruments revealed. Something sat quietly in the dark, as you are doing now, and let the scale of everything wash over it like a slow tide, neither trying to hold it nor trying to turn away from it, just receiving it, the way you receive a sound that is too large to fully understand but too beautiful to ignore. That is not nothing. In the ledger of the cosmos, that may in fact be one of the most extraordinary entries. The universe, as best we can determine, spent the first several 100,000 years of its existence as a hot, opaque plasma in which light could not travel freely. Then it cooled enough for electrons and protons to combine into hydrogen atoms, and suddenly the universe became transparent, and light moved through it for the first time, and that light is the cosmic microwave background we still detect today. 400 millions of years after that, the universe was dark. No stars yet. No galaxies. Just hydrogen and helium and dark matter, slowly gathering under gravity, cooling, condensing, building toward the ignition points that would eventually become the first stars. Those first stars were enormous and brilliant and brief. They burned through their fuel in millions of years rather than billions, and when they ended, they seeded the universe with the first heavy elements: carbon, oxygen, iron, all the elements that biology would eventually require. Every atom heavier than helium in your body was forged in a stellar interior or scattered in a stellar death. You are, in the most literal and non-metaphorical sense, made of the universe's own history. Assembled from the debris of events that happened long before this world existed, in stars whose light has long since gone out, in explosions so vast they briefly outshone entire galaxies. And out of that material, over timescales that dwarf everything we have discussed so far, something assembled itself that could look back. There is a phrase that astronomers and cosmologists sometimes use, almost casually, that carries more weight than it is usually given. They say that we are how the universe knows itself. It is not a mystical claim. It is almost a structural one. The universe, through the operation of its own physics, has produced arrangements of matter complex enough to model it, to measure it, to hold a representation of it inside a few pounds of biological tissue balanced atop a fragile skeleton on the surface of a small, warm world. The map is inside the territory. The cosmos has folded back on itself and produced something that contains, however approximately, an image of the whole. That is the deepest answer to the question of cosmic loneliness. Not a comforting answer, necessarily. Not a simple one, but a true one, or as close to true as we can currently reach. The loneliest places in the universe are lonely by measure, by distance, by the absence of neighbors and light and the warmth of nearby stars. The void regions are lonely. The rogue planets are lonely. The future universe, emptied by expansion, will be lonely in a way that makes our current cosmic neighborhood feel almost crowded. These are real conditions, real geometries, real features of the space we inhabit and the time through which we are moving. And yet loneliness, in the fullest sense of the word, requires something to be lonely. Requires a perspective. Requires a point of reference from which distance can be measured and absence can be felt. The void is not lonely to itself. The rogue planet does not suffer its isolation. The darkness of the deep future will not mourn the galaxies that have slipped beyond the horizon. Loneliness, like beauty and like meaning, is something that happens at the intersection of the universe and the consciousness that has grown, improbably, inside it. Which means that the question of the loneliest places in the universe is, quietly and inevitably, also a question about the nature of awareness itself. About what it means to perceive distance. About what it means to stand at a particular point in space and time, surrounded by an enormity you can measure but not fully hold, and feel both the weight of your smallness and the strange, irreducible fact of your presence. You are here. In a universe this vast, this old, this largely empty, this indifferent to the survival of any particular arrangement of atoms, you are here, and you are aware of being here, and that awareness reaches outward across the dark the way light reaches outward, in all directions at once, touching distances it may never fully cross, but traveling nonetheless, because that is the nature of light, and perhaps also the nature of attention, and perhaps also the nature of whatever it is we mean when we use the word love in its largest, quietest, most unconditional form. There is a particular quality to the dark that comes just before deep sleep. You may be familiar with it. The edges of thought begin to soften. The boundaries between one idea and the next become permeable. Images arrive without invitation and dissolve without conclusion. The mind, loosening its grip on the project of wakefulness, begins to move differently, more slowly, more associatively, the way water moves when it is no longer directed but simply allowed to find its own level. And in that state, the distances we have been traveling together begin to feel less like facts to be understood and more like a landscape to be felt, the way you feel a landscape from a train at night, not cataloging it but receiving it, letting it pass through you while you remain still. Let yourself move toward that now. We have been speaking of the loneliest places in the universe, and we have arrived, through that long and patient journey, at a place that is perhaps the strangest and most vertiginous of all. Not a void between galaxy filaments. Not a rogue planet in the interstellar dark. Not the emptied sky of the deep future. But the present moment itself, considered from the inside, considered from the particular vantage point of a conscious being in the middle of an enormous cosmos that has no center, no edge, no preferred location, and no intrinsic reason to produce anything like experience, and yet somehow has. Cosmologists speak of the observable universe as a sphere centered on the observer. Not centered on Earth in any special sense, but centered on whatever point is doing the observing. Because light travels at a finite speed and the universe has a finite age, there is a maximum distance from which light can have reached us by now, and that distance defines our cosmic horizon, our personal bubble of the knowable. From any other point in the universe, the observable sphere would be centered differently, would encompass a different, though overlapping, set of galaxies and voids and filaments. In this sense, every observer is at the center of their own universe. Not because they are special, not because the cosmos has arranged itself around them, but simply because perception requires a location, and every location has its own horizon. You are at the center of your observable universe right now. The sphere of everything you could in principle ever know extends outward from where you lie in every direction equally, for about 46 billion light-years, encompassing hundreds of billions of galaxies, trillions of stars, an almost incomprehensible volume of space and time and matter and energy. And beyond that sphere, separated from you not by any wall or boundary but simply by the geometry of time and light, lies more. Much more. Possibly infinite more, depending on which models of cosmic geometry turn out to reflect reality. The universe may be infinite. The observable universe is not. And in that gap, between the finite sphere you can in principle know and the possibly infinite extension of what exists beyond it, there lives a specific and unusual kind of solitude. The solitude of the horizon. The solitude of standing at the edge of the knowable and understanding that the edge is not the end, that beyond it the universe continues indifferently, enormously, without regard for whether you can see it or not. There are regions of space, right now, in which events are occurring that are outside every observer's horizon. Not outside some observer's horizons, but outside all of them. Regions so remote from every point in the observable universe that no signal from them has ever reached any location where any observer could be present. These regions are, in the deepest possible sense, completely isolated from the universe we inhabit. They obey the same physics, arose from the same beginning, are made of the same fundamental particles arranged according to the same fundamental forces. But they are informationally sealed from us, now and forever, by the simple, absolute limitation of how fast light can travel and how long the universe has existed. It is possible, depending on the curvature of space on the very largest scales, that the universe repeats. That if you traveled far enough in any direction, you would eventually encounter regions statistically identical to our own, because in an infinite universe containing a finite set of possible quantum configurations, every configuration must eventually recur. There may be, somewhere beyond the horizon, another arrangement of matter so similar to our solar system, to our world, to this very moment, that the differences would be imperceptible. Another quiet room. Another person resting in the dark. Another version of this same slow listening. Whether this is true, we cannot know. We cannot reach those distances. We cannot receive signals from them. We can only derive the possibility mathematically and hold it the way you hold an idea that is too large for certainty but too compelling for dismissal. We hold it lightly. We let it rest in the same soft place where we keep the other great uncertainties of existence, the ones that do not resolve, that do not need to resolve, that can simply be present the way the dark is present, the way silence is present, not as an absence of something better but as a condition with its own particular texture, its own particular weight, its own way of pressing gently against the awareness that receives it. And awareness, tonight, is softening. You can feel it, perhaps, in the way your thoughts are moving now. Less directed than they were. Less insistent. The narrative of the day, with all its details and demands and small urgencies, has grown quieter. It has not disappeared, perhaps, but it has receded the way a coastline recedes when you are moving out to sea, still visible for a while, still recognizable, but no longer the primary thing. The primary thing, now, is the open water. The primary thing, now, is the dark and the distance and the slow, breathing movement of something enormous and calm beneath you. Let it hold you. There is a structure in the universe called the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall. It is the largest known structure in the observable universe, a vast concentration of galaxies and galaxy clusters spanning approximately 10 billion light-years from one edge to the other. To put that in some relation to something, the observable universe itself is roughly 93 billion light-years in diameter. This single structure occupies more than a tenth of that total span. It is so large that its very existence challenges certain assumptions of the standard cosmological model, which predicts that on the very largest scales, matter should be distributed roughly uniformly, without structures larger than a few 100 million light-years. The Great Wall is not a few 100 million light-years. It is 10 billion. It is an anomaly that the universe has not yet explained to us. And even within that colossal structure, even within that concentration of matter so immense it strains the boundaries of cosmological theory, the individual galaxies are separated by millions of light-years of open space. Even in the densest regions of the universe's largest known feature, the predominant substance is emptiness. The galaxies are not touching. They are not close by any measure that would feel like closeness to a human being. They are islands in an ocean, and the ocean between them is cold and dark and very, very deep. This is one of the things the universe seems most committed to, across all scales and all structures. The preservation of distance. The maintenance of the space between things. Even where matter has clustered most dramatically, even where gravity has pulled hardest and held longest, the space between persists. The emptiness is not eliminated. It is compressed, perhaps, relative to the great voids, but it is never removed. There is always a between. There is always a crossing required. Perhaps that is simply physics. The inevitable consequence of how matter behaves, how gravity operates, how the initial conditions of the universe set everything in motion. Perhaps it carries no lesson, no meaning, no metaphor that extends into human experience. The universe did not arrange itself to teach us anything. It arranged itself according to forces that preceded the existence of any mind capable of drawing lessons. And yet the lessons arrive anyway. Not because they were placed there, but because the mind that looks at the universe is the same kind of mind that looks at its own life, and it cannot help but find the same patterns, the same geometries, the same recurring shapes in both. Distance. Connection. The space between. The long crossing. The message sent without certainty of arrival. The light traveling through the dark toward a horizon it may never reach. We find these shapes everywhere because they are, perhaps, the fundamental shapes of existence itself, at every scale from the subatomic to the cosmological. The electron does not touch the nucleus. The planets do not touch the sun. The stars do not touch each other. The galaxies, even in collision, pass through one another largely as ghosts, their stars too widely separated to physically meet. Everything that exists does so at a distance from everything else. Contact, in the deepest physical sense, may be something that never truly occurs. What we call touch is electromagnetic repulsion. What we call closeness is a relative compression of the distances that always remain. And still, across all of those distances, the forces carry. Gravity reaches. Light travels. Signals propagate. The universe is not connected in the way that touching is connected, but it is connected in the way that influence is connected, the way that a stone dropped in still water sends ripples to shores it will never reach itself. You are part of that propagation. The warmth leaving your body right now is infrared radiation moving outward at the speed of light. In a few microseconds it will have left the room. In 8 minutes, if it could travel unimpeded, it would pass the orbit of Mars. In 4 years it would reach the nearest star. In 2.5 million years it would arrive at Andromeda. It is already on its way. It has already left. The universe is already receiving it, absorbing it, redistributing it according to the same laws that govern the motion of galaxies and the cooling of stellar remnants and the slow, patient expansion of space itself. You are already part of the cosmos in the most literal sense. Not metaphorically integrated into it, not spiritually connected to it in some way that requires belief, but physically, demonstrably, measurably continuous with it. The boundary between you and the universe is a convenient fiction that biology maintains for practical purposes. In the deeper accounting, there is no boundary. There is only the gradient. A slow, continuous dimming of concentration from the dense arrangement of matter you call a body to the diffuse arrangement of matter you call the room, and then to the thinner arrangement you call the air outside, and then outward, ever outward, into densities so low that the human mind was not designed to hold them. And it is into those densities, those vast, patient, almost incomprehensible thinnesses, that we must now travel. Because the universe is not only the places where matter gathered. The universe is also, and perhaps more honestly, the places where it did not. Consider the spaces between galaxies. Not the space between stars, which is already vast beyond comfortable imagining. The 4 light-years between our Sun and Proxima Centauri, the nearest stellar neighbor, a distance so large that if the Sun were reduced to a grain of sand, Proxima would be another grain of sand approximately 25 miles away, with nothing between them but vacuum and the occasional stray atom of hydrogen. Not that kind of space. Something larger. Something that makes that interstellar emptiness feel, by comparison, almost cozy. The spaces between galaxies. Our Milky Way exists within a gravitationally bound collection of galaxies called the local group. Andromeda is the largest member. There are about 50 others, most of them small, most of them dwarf galaxies huddled close to the 2 great spirals like embers near a fire. And the local group itself is part of the Virgo supercluster, which is part of an even larger structure called Loneliest, a supercluster of superclusters spanning 500 million light-years and containing the gravitational futures of approximately 100,000 galaxies. But between these structures, between the superclusters, between the filaments of cosmic web that connect them, there are regions that have almost nothing at all. They are called voids. Not as a poetic description, as a scientific classification. Cosmic voids. Regions of space that are measurably, statistically, almost completely empty of galaxies, of matter, of any significant concentration of anything at all. The Boötes void is one of the most famous. It spans approximately 330 million light-years. If you were to place our entire Milky Way at its center, the nearest neighboring galaxy would be so far away that its light, traveling at the only speed light knows how to travel, would take 165 million years to reach you. And in the space between you and that distant shore, there would be almost nothing. A handful of galaxies, scattered so sparsely that the darkness between them is the dominant feature of the landscape. Astronomers, when they first measured the Boötes void in 1981, were so surprised by its scale that they jokingly asked whether someone had moved the galaxies. The humor contained a genuine bewilderment. The void was larger than the models had predicted. Larger than seemed reasonable. It challenged assumptions about how matter distributed itself across the early universe, about how gravity had organized the cosmos in the billions of years since the Big Bang. Even now, the full explanation for why certain voids are so extraordinarily empty remains a subject of active investigation, of careful measurement, of slowly refined understanding. But what is most striking about the voids is not their scientific implications. It is what they feel like to contemplate. They are the loneliest places in the universe. Not lonely in the way a quiet room is lonely, or in the way a long drive through desert is lonely. Lonely in a way that has no human analog. lonely in the way that only pure mathematics and the patient silence of telescopes can begin to approximate. If you were somehow suspended in the center of the Boötes void, if you could sit, as you are sitting or lying now, and look outward in every direction, you would see almost nothing. No Milky Way arching overhead. No nearby nebulae glowing softly against the dark. The stars that are visible from Earth's surface on a clear night, all 100 billion of them belonging to our galaxy alone, would be entirely absent. In their place, a darkness so complete, so uninterrupted, that the concept of night would lose its meaning. Night implies a day. Darkness implies a light that has temporarily withdrawn. In the center of a cosmic void, neither implication holds. The darkness is not temporary. It is not waiting for anything. It simply is. And yet, even there, in that most profound of absences, the universe has not quite managed to achieve true emptiness. The void is not a vacuum in the classical sense. There are photons passing through it, ancient light from the cosmic microwave background, the thermal afterglow of the Big Bang itself, now cooled to just 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, traveling in every direction simultaneously, filling even the most forsaken corners of space with a whisper of radiation so faint and so ancient that it constitutes the universe's earliest memory. There are neutrinos streaming through at nearly the speed of light, interacting with almost nothing, passing through galaxies and planets and the dense cores of stars as though they were not there. And there is dark matter, that silent and invisible scaffold whose nature remains one of the deepest unsolved mysteries in all of physics, present even in the voids, even in the loneliest of places, threading its invisible presence through the dark like a memory that refuses to fully dissolve. The universe, it seems, cannot help itself. Even in its most extreme acts of absence, it leaves something behind. Even in the voids, even in the 300 million light-year stretches of near-nothingness, the background hum of existence persists. The laws of physics do not take a holiday in the empty places. Gravity still operates, still reaches across those incomprehensible distances with its patient, tireless grip. Quantum fields still fluctuate, still breathe their subtle, probabilistic breath. The void is not nothing. It is a very particular kind of something. A something so dilute, so sparse, so stripped of the usual furniture of existence, that it forces a reckoning with what we actually mean when we use the word empty. We use it casually. An empty glass. An empty room. An empty afternoon. But these are fullnesses wearing the costume of absence. The glass is filled with air. The room is threaded with electromagnetic fields, with sound waves, with the gravitational influence of every massive object in the observable universe arriving simultaneously from every direction. The empty afternoon is dense with the electrochemical weather of a living mind moving through time. True emptiness, the kind that the voids approach but never quite achieve, is something that ordinary human life never encounters and ordinary human language was not built to carry. And perhaps that is why contemplating the voids produces something unusual in the mind. Something that is not quite fear, and not quite wonder, and not quite sorrow, but contains elements of all three. A kind of vertiginous stillness. The feeling of standing at the edge of something that has no other edge. The voids do not threaten. They do not loom. They simply extend, quietly and without apology, in every direction, for distances that make the word distance seem insufficient. There is a particular quality to this kind of space that astronomers sometimes struggle to communicate and poets sometimes struggle to leave alone. It is the quality of scale that has exceeded all available metaphor. When we say that the Boötes void is 330 million light-years across, we have said something technically accurate and experientially meaningless. The number exists. The void exists. The relationship between the number and the reality it describes exists somewhere in the mathematics, in the measurements, in the carefully calibrated instruments that mapped it. But inside the human body, lying still in a darkened room, breathing slowly, the number lands without weight. It passes through awareness the way a neutrino passes through the Earth, leaving almost no trace, registering almost nothing. And yet the attempt to hold it, even partially, even unsuccessfully, does something to the mind. Something quiet and not unpleasant. The attempt itself is a kind of meditation, a deliberate exposure to the limits of comprehension. And in that exposure, in that gentle pressing against the boundary of what the mind can hold, something loosens. The ordinary concerns that fill a waking life, the frictions and the deadlines and the small persistent anxieties that accumulate like sediment, they do not disappear, exactly. But they recede. They find their proper scale, which is very small, against the backdrop of a void that spans 330 million light-years of patient, ancient dark. This is one of the gifts that astronomy offers, and it is not always recognized as such. Not the data, though the data is extraordinary. Not the technology, though the technology is a kind of miracle. But the perspective, the slow, accumulating, almost medicinal perspective that comes from genuinely reckoning with the scale of what exists, from allowing the mind to rest, however briefly, in the presence of something so much larger than itself that the self becomes, for a moment, refreshingly irrelevant. In the center of the Boötes void, if you were there, and if you waited long enough, you would eventually see something. Not a star, not a nearby galaxy, but the very faint, very diffuse glow of the cosmic microwave background, that ancient radiation, arriving from the edge of the observable universe in every direction equally. It would not look like light in any familiar sense. It would look like the faintest possible suggestion of warmth, detectable only by instruments far more sensitive than eyes. But it would be there. And knowing it was there, knowing that even in that most remote of locations the universe was still reaching, still transmitting its oldest signal, still whispering the record of its own beginning across every intervening distance, would be its own kind of company. A cold company. A very old company. But company nonetheless. There are other voids. The universe is structured, on the largest scales, like a vast three-dimensional web. The cosmic web, as it is called, consists of filaments, long threads of galaxies and dark matter connecting gravitational nodes called clusters. And between the filaments, between the nodes, between the clustered and connected regions where matter found its way to other matter, the voids open up like the spaces between the strands of something enormous and loosely woven. They are not rare. They are, in fact, the dominant feature of the universe's large-scale architecture. Most of the volume of the observable universe is void. Most of space, measured honestly, is closer to the center of a void than it is to any galaxy. The filaments and clusters and superclusters that contain all the stars and planets and light and life are, in terms of sheer volume, the exception. The darkness is not the background. The darkness is the substance. The light is the exception. The matter is the outlier. And the voids are not the spaces between the story. They are the story, told in the language of absence, written across scales that dwarf everything we have ever named or measured or loved. Sit with that for a moment. Let it settle the way dust settles in a still room, slowly, without urgency, finding its way down through the quiet air to rest on whatever surface waits below. The universe is mostly void. The universe is mostly dark. The universe is mostly empty in a way that no human word for empty fully honors. And yet here, in this small and improbable corner of it, matter gathered. Here, gravity found enough to work with. Here, a star ignited, and a planet formed around it, and on that planet, in conditions so specific and so fragile that the probability of their occurrence still humbles the scientists who study them, something began to metabolize, to replicate, to grow, to eventually look upward and wonder. You are that wondering. Right now, in this moment, the universe is experiencing itself through the particular instrument of your awareness. Your curiosity, however drowsy, however soft at the edges with the approach of sleep, is a real physical process occurring in a real physical brain made of real atoms that were forged in the cores of stars that no longer exist. The iron in your blood was made in a supernova. The calcium in your bones was assembled in the final moments of a stellar life. The oxygen you are breathing right now, the oxygen moving slowly in and out of your lungs as you lie in the dark, was scattered into space by ancient stellar winds billions of years before the Earth existed. You did not come into the universe. You came out of it. The distinction matters. It changes the nature of the relationship entirely. And the voids, those vast, patient, almost perfectly empty stretches of space, they are part of that relationship too. They are the context that makes the gathering meaningful. Without the emptiness, there is no contrast. Without the dark, there is no way to see the light. The void is not the opposite of existence. It is its necessary companion. The silence that makes the note audible. The pause that gives the breath its rhythm. There is a place in the observable universe that astronomers have identified as a candidate for the largest single structure ever discovered. It is called the Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall, a filament of galaxies and galaxy clusters so immense that it spans approximately 10 billion light-years. 10 billion light-years. The observable universe itself is only 93 billion light-years across. This single structure represents more than a tenth of the entire observable cosmos in one continuous, gravitationally associated feature. It is so large that it challenges the cosmological principle, the foundational assumption that the universe, viewed at large enough scales, is roughly the same in all directions, roughly uniform, roughly smooth. The Great Wall suggests that perhaps the universe has structure at scales we had not anticipated. That the web is woven with threads larger than our models comfortably predicted. And flanking that Great Wall, surrounding it, pressing against its edges with their patient and enormous presence, are the voids. The absences that define its shape. The darkness that allows it to be seen. Astronomy is, in many ways, the science of contrast. Of signal against noise. Of light measured against the darkness through which it travels. Every photograph ever taken of a distant galaxy is a record of photons that crossed unimaginable distances of void before arriving at a detector and leaving their mark. The image of Andromeda, 2.5 million light-years away, that you may have seen in a textbook or on a screen, was made by light that traveled through intergalactic space for 2.5 million years, through the cold and the dark and the near emptiness, to reach us. Every astronomical image is a letter that took an almost incomprehensible amount of time to arrive. Every observation is the end of a very long journey through the loneliest places imaginable. And we receive them. We build instruments sensitive enough to catch photons that have been traveling since before our species existed, since before our planet existed, since before our solar system condensed from the cloud of gas and dust that gave it birth. We point our telescopes at the dark and we wait, patiently, for the light to come. And it does come. It always comes. Because the universe, whatever else it is not silent. It is transmitting, constantly, in every wavelength, from every direction, across every distance. The void is full of messages in transit. Full of light that has not yet arrived. Full of information moving at the only speed available to it, patient and unstoppable and ancient. You are surrounded by that transmission right now. The cosmic microwave background is passing through the walls of this room. Through the ceiling. Through the floor. Through you. 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, the oldest light in the universe, the thermal echo of the Big Bang itself, arriving from every direction simultaneously, carrying within its subtle temperature fluctuations the seeds of everything that later formed. Every galaxy, every void, every filament of the cosmic web, every star that ever burned. The pattern was already there, encoded in the radiation, written in the first moments of time itself, waiting across nearly 14 billion years to be read, waiting to be measured, waiting for something with eyes and instruments and the particular kind of patience that only a conscious mind can sustain to turn toward it and recognize it for what it is. The oldest story ever told, written in the temperature of the sky itself, in variations so subtle that they amount to differences of 1 part in 100,000, and yet containing within those whisper-thin fluctuations the entire blueprint of the universe as it would become. We read it. With satellites and radio telescopes and decades of careful, painstaking calibration, we read it. The COBE satellite in 1992. The WMAP mission in the early 2000s. The Planck satellite, which produced the most detailed map ever made of the cosmic microwave background, released its findings in 2013. Each successive reading more precise than the last. Each one confirming and refining the picture. The universe began hot and dense and almost perfectly uniform. Almost. Not quite. There were tiny quantum fluctuations in the earliest moments, variations in density so small they would have been invisible to any hypothetical observer, had observers existed then, which they did not. And gravity took those fluctuations and amplified them over hundreds of millions of years, pulling matter toward the slightly denser regions, evacuating the slightly emptier ones, stretching the small differences into the vast architecture of filaments and voids and clusters that we observe today. The voids are the echoes of those earliest underdensities. The great empty places in the universe are the grown and expanded descendants of quantum fluctuations that occurred in the first fraction of the first second of time. The loneliness of the Boötes void traces its origin to an event that happened before atoms existed, before light could travel freely, before time itself had any of the character it would later develop. The void is old in a way that the word old cannot carry without assistance. And you are lying here, in the dark, breathing slowly, your body warm, your mind moving in long, slow currents toward sleep, and you are made of the descendants of those same fluctuations. The matter that gathered to form you came from regions that were slightly overdense in those earliest moments. Gravity found your atoms first, gathered them, passed them through stars, scattered them, gathered them again. Across billions of years and billions of light-years of cosmic history, the matter that is currently arranged into the shape of you was moving, slowly, toward this moment, toward this room, toward this particular configuration of atoms that thinks and breathes and wonders. The void and you share an origin, different outcomes of the same initial conditions. The emptiness out there and the fullness in here are both children of the same ancient fluctuation, the same primordial unevenness that seeded everything. You are what happens when the overdense regions have billions of years to work with. The voids are what happens when they do not. And between those two outcomes, between the exquisite complexity of a living mind and the vast patient emptiness of a cosmic void, the universe contains everything else. Every star and planet and nebula and black hole and wandering rogue planet drifting through interstellar space without a sun to orbit. Every molecule of water on every ocean world. Every photon in transit across every distance. All of it held within the same laws, governed by the same constants, participating in the same slow and magnificent unfolding. There is a concept in cosmology called the heat death of the universe. It is the projected final state of everything, the destination toward which the second law of thermodynamics is slowly, inexorably guiding all of existence. As the universe expands and cools, as stars exhaust their fuel and go dark, As black holes eventually evaporate through Hawking radiation over timescales so vast they make the current age of the universe look like an opening breath, entropy will continue to increase. Differences will continue to smooth out. The temperature gradient that currently allows for complexity, for stars and planets and weather and life, will continue to diminish. And eventually, after a duration that can only be written in scientific notation, after more time than the human mind has any genuine access to, the universe will approach a state of maximum entropy. A state in which every part of it is at the same temperature. In which no gradients remain. In which no work can be done and no complexity can be maintained and no information can be processed. It will be the final and most complete void. Not a void of space, exactly, but a void of difference. A void of gradient. A stillness so perfect and so total that even the cosmic microwave background will have cooled beyond any meaningful detection, and the darkness will be a darkness that makes the Boötes void feel, by comparison, almost intimate. But that is so far away. So incomprehensibly far away in time that it has no claim on this moment. This moment, measured against the remaining lifespan of the universe, is still extraordinarily early. The universe is approximately 13.8 billion years old. The last stars are not expected to go dark for another 100 trillion years. We are in the first chapter. We are in the opening pages of a story whose length we cannot fully articulate. The universe is young, in the only sense that matters when the numbers are large enough. And in its youth, it is still building, still burning, still gathering and scattering and recombining, still producing, in its rare and precious overdense regions, the conditions that allow for something as improbable and as brief and as luminous as a conscious mind lying in the dark, listening to the silence, feeling the slow rise and fall of breath, and knowing, in whatever way a mind can know anything, that it is here, that it exists, that the universe, in this particular corner, at this particular moment, has arranged itself into something capable of asking where it came from and what it is and how large the dark between the galaxies truly is. That knowing is not a small thing. It may be, in fact, the rarest thing in the observable universe. Rarer than neutron stars. Rarer than the conditions that produce diamond oceans on ice giants far beyond the reach of any current telescope. Rarer than the precise gravitational choreography that keeps a planet at just the right distance from just the right kind of star for just long enough that liquid water persists on its surface across geological timescales. Consciousness, awareness, the simple irreducible fact of there being something it is like to be you, is, as far as we can determine from everything we have observed, extraordinarily uncommon. We have found no evidence of it anywhere beyond this planet. We have sent our signals outward and received no reply. We have scanned the sky in every wavelength and found no unmistakable signature of another mind at work among the stars. That silence may mean many things. It may mean we are not listening correctly. It may mean the distances are simply too great, the timescales too mismatched, for signals to arrive within the narrow window of a technological civilization's lifespan. It may mean that the emergence of minds like ours is a process that takes so long and requires such specific conditions that the universe, vast as it is, has produced very few of them so far. Or it may mean something more solitary still. Something that the voids, in their patient and enormous emptiness, seem almost to suggest by their very existence. That the universe is, in some deep structural sense, arranged more around absence than presence, more around silence than signal, more around the long, cold stretches of nothing in particular than around the brief, warm, improbable exceptions. And yet here you are, an exception, lying still in the particular darkness of a room on a planet in a solar system on the edge of a spiral arm of a galaxy that is itself unremarkable in its cluster, in its supercluster, in the vast and webbed architecture of everything. Here you are, at the end of a lineage that stretches back through every ancestor who survived long enough to reproduce, back through the first multicellular organisms, back through the first replicating molecules in the first warm chemical environments of a young planet, back through the supernova that seeded that planet's solar system with heavy elements, back through the stars that burned before our sun existed, back through the first stars that ignited in the dark of a young universe still cooling from its birth. Here you are, at the end of all of that, at the tip of a thread that runs through nearly 14 billion years of cosmic history without once breaking. The loneliest places in the universe are real. The voids are real. The distances are real. The silence between the stars is real, and it is vast, and it is old, and it makes no concessions to the smallness of human feeling or the brevity of human life. But you are also real. Your warmth is real. The slow movement of air in your lungs is real. The weight of your body against whatever surface holds you is real. And the fact that you are here, that you have traveled through this darkness and this silence and these incomprehensible distances, not through space but through time, not by moving but by being the outcome of everything that moved before you, that fact is as real and as remarkable as anything the universe contains. The voids will persist long after the stars that currently light them from their distant edges have gone dark. The cosmic web will continue its slow evolution, its filaments thinning as expansion carries everything outward, its voids deepening as the matter within them grows sparser still. The universe will continue doing what it has always done, which is to say, everything across every scale, according to laws that do not bend and constants that do not waver and a geometry that curves and expands and contains within itself every atom that will ever exist, because no new matter is being created, only rearranged, only moved from configuration to configuration through the long patient work of physics. And through all of it, the light will keep traveling. Your infrared warmth, already departed, already moving outward through the dark. The ancient signal of the cosmic microwave background, still arriving from every direction, still carrying its encoded memory of the beginning. The photons from distant galaxies, crossing the voids, crossing the filaments, crossing the incomprehensible distances between here and everything else, patient and unstoppable and made of the same fundamental stuff as every other interaction in the universe. Everything is in transit. Everything has always been in transit. The universe is not a collection of objects in space. It is a process. A slow, magnificent, mostly dark, occasionally luminous process, and you are part of it, and you have always been part of it, and the loneliest places it contains are also, in the deepest sense available to physics, the places you came from. The void is not where life is absent. The void is where life has not yet had time to arrive. And somewhere, in the long patience of cosmic time, in the hundreds of trillions of years still remaining before the last stars exhaust their fire, perhaps it will. Perhaps the universe is not finished surprising itself. Perhaps the rarest thing it has produced so far, this fragile, luminous, wondering awareness, is not an ending but a beginning. A first attempt. A rough and early draft of something the cosmos is still learning how to make. For now, the voids are quiet. The filaments burn softly at their edges. The background radiation whispers through every wall and every ceiling and every sleeping body on this small and improbable planet. The expansion continues, steady and indifferent and vast. And you are here, inside all of it, held by gravity, warmed by a star, made of ancient light, drifting slowly toward the temporary and necessary darkness of sleep. Let the distances be what they are. Let the voids be as empty as they need to be. You are, in this moment, exactly where 14 billion years of cosmic history arranged for you to be. And that is enough. That has always been enough. Close your eyes. The universe will continue its work. It always does. It always will. And somewhere in the dark between the galaxies, your warmth is still traveling, still moving outward, still carrying the fact of you into the silence. Gently, irreversibly, forever.